Hey everyone, welcome back to another video from A Man Talks NRL SuperCoach. If you're in New South Wales, hope you're having a good long weekend and enjoying round 14. This will be the roundup number 14 as we go through a summary of every game and any SuperCoach point scoring highlights. So in terms of the trade that I actually made this week, I didn't make it very clear in my trade targets video. I ended up doing Jerome Luai to Cody Walker. I just thought, with Cody Walker's matchup and his run coming up, also in round 17, he'll be playing. I thought that would be a decent move to make. Although, unfortunately, I've just heard after I made that trade that Josh Schuster is not going to be available for next week in round 15 as well. So I'm a little bit disappointed by that. I might have traded Schuster at that point in time. But anyway, live with the result. And a bit of a surprise trade. I was intending to actually trade Christian Welch to Corey Harawira-Naera. But with the news of James Tedesco actually not being named against the Titans, I decided that I was going to trade Tedesco. The reason being was that if he was missing the Titans match, he'd be versing the Panthers, the Storm, both teams full strength as well. And then he'll miss round 17 through Origin. So the next three, I don't think that he'll be point scoring that well. So I actually traded Tedesco to Alex Johnson from the Rabbitohs as well, just to get an additional round 17 playing number. And he did really well this game. So that definitely did help for this round. So let me know in the comments below, guys, what you guys are currently on in terms of point scoring. So I'm on 1,189 and that's all 17 played. I am recording this before the Bulldogs Dragons game. I don't have anyone playing in that. The scores have been updated. I don't know whether those are actually final though, but 1,189 is what I'm on. I feel like that's a little bit above par. Par feels about maybe 1,100, 1,150. There were a lot of key players out this week, so I think a lot of people were struggling to field a full 17. So I'm pretty happy with the score at the moment. But let's get into the roundup number 14. So the first game of the round was the Sea Eagles taking on the Cowboys. With the Sea Eagles with no turbo, they absolutely smashed the Cowboys, 50 points to 18, and Cherry Evans was the one to pull the strings here, having 4 try assists, a couple of line breaks as well, some tackle breaks, some offloads, on his way to a massive 148. Really, really big score from him. I don't think he'd be very heavily owned though. Cherry Evans, I guess, is a good example of someone who has this really high upside. Ruben Garrick as well, having a really, really big score of 106, again showing that with his goal kicking, and he played at fullback in this game as well. He was able to, he made a lot of runs, he was able to gain a lot of meters with his goal kicking. He's able to get these really high scores. And he's someone who we flagged a couple of weeks back, given that how well Manly were playing with turbo. And even without turbo, this is a good example and a good showing for them that they can actually put some points on without him. But with turbo coming back into the team, and also the Sea Eagles' next couple of games against the Titans and the Bulldogs look really, really enticing. And I think if you're a Ruben Garrick owner, you're obviously very, very happy. If not, he is very, very expensive, but he still could be a very good purchase because he will cover the round 17 bye week as well. Brad Parker as well, scoring 103, scoring a double. Hank Scorpio for any Simpsons watchers there. He did really well. Ola Kawatu as well with a double, I think he got, with 88 points. Another big game from him. There were a lot of good point scorers overall for the Sea Eagles. Lachlan Croker with 76. Carl Lawton, I know I said he's a bit of a trap potentially with people coming back. The fact that Schuster's not coming back into the team next week as well probably means that Lawton is going to have a little bit more time starting in the second row, and he came over the try in this game to get 76. So pretty good, obviously, value for anyone who's bought him, and you should go up quite a bit in price. Marty Tapau as well had a really, really strong game, 69 points, and I'm pretty sure it was all in base and power, so just in runs, offloads, tackle breaks, and tackles made, sorry. So 69 points from him. He is a great round 17 front row forward. I discussed him a little bit in this week in my front row forward watch list for round 17, and I think that he's a very good purchase. He's a little bit expensive. He'll be close around 600k, but I think with front row forward being so barren, I think you can't really go too much further than to Powell for a round 17 pickup, and he had a great game again this week, coming in around 54 minutes, so good PPM from him. Kieran Foran was the last player to get over 60 for the Sea Eagles. Apart from that, though, probably not too many other notable considerations. I mean, you've got Jason Saab there, only with the 26. It's kind of an example of when he doesn't score tries. He has very, very low base and really hits these low scores. Ben Trbojevic, I have him I bought him as enough at the beginning of the season. But he's obviously got some game time, come over the 24 here. So if he was like your auto emergency score that you had to cop from, not having a full 17 or something like that, he wasn't the worst. 24 points, you can probably live with that as an AE. On the Cowboys side, there wasn't too much happening here. I mean, Scott Drinkwater has put together pretty decent 3-round average with this 77 and a few good scores in the past couple of weeks as well. And Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow scored pretty well with the 70 points here. Other good performances were Murray Talaugi, who's actually put in some good performances actually in the past few weeks for SuperCoach scoring. Potentially he's a consideration for round 17 coverage. Javid Bowen, who was a very popular kind of cheapy centre wing a few weeks back, he's still chipping in with some decent scores as well. So he actually probably was looking like a pretty decent purchase because he'll probably make at least 100k or if not more, which is probably the good benchmark to look at in terms of a cash cow and the minimum that you want to see from them. Apart from that, though, there wasn't really too much to speak of here. I mean, you got Val Holmes only with a 42. Obviously, backing up from Origin, he was relatively quiet, and obviously, you wouldn't expect him to be fully fit or fully fresh. Sorry, is probably what I meant to say. And Jason Tamalolo, again, with a 42, we mentioned him potentially as a consideration for round 17. He's a SuperCoach gun of the past, but he's still only playing 54 minutes. We're just not seeing the same impact, and I just don't think I'd be tempted to buy him anytime soon until I see like a couple of good scores back to back where he is still playing good minutes. At the moment, he's just not really appealing to me. But apart from that, very, very comfortable win for the Sea Eagles in this one. So the next game of the round was the Sharks taking on the Panthers, with the Sharks just edging them out 19 points to 18. It was a very, very fun watch as a neutral fan. You had the Sharks go out to an 18-point lead, then the Panthers come all the way back on the back of Matt Burton, with Shaun Johnson just icing the game though, with a very wonky field goal. It definitely wasn't like Val Holmes from a few weeks back, but a field goal is a field goal, got the job done. So Matt Burton, we'll just touch on him first. He was the best performer out of the Panthers with 108. It was very, very interesting. He was on like 0 or 1 point at halftime, and then he comes away with 108 after scoring a double and also setting up the try for Targo. So again, very happy to see that 108, and he'll probably be definitely in the side, I think, for a few more weeks, hopefully to cash him out at the peak of his price, and definitely is a perfect candidate to flip to like a Shaun Johnson or maybe a Cody Nikorima, etc. for a round 17 playing halfback or 5'8". Apart from that, though, had Coruscant with the 73 points. Moses Leota did pretty well with the 62, but I think you really just want to see the State of Origin stars come back to the Panthers. We want our Clearys, our To'os, our Luais, etc. Well, not Luai for me. I sold him this week. But in terms of how the Panthers are playing, they performed a lot better this week than compared to last week, but you can tell that they're still missing those guns, and they're really keen to get them back, I think, for the next couple of weeks. Because they've got games, I think, against the Roosters next week, which is a really, really top game, and I can't remember their round 16 matchup. On the Sharks here, you had Ronaldo Mulatalo was their best performer with an 84, potentially maybe a good point of difference centre wing. There's a lot of discussion about Jesse Ramian, and rightly so, looking at his numbers and also the draw for the Sharks. I mean, same draw applies obviously for Mulatalo, and he might potentially be able to knock out a few tries over the next few weeks and get some decent scores. Shaun Johnson, I think, is the one who most people are going to be trying to target. He came away with a 79 here, very, very good game from him. It definitely looks like a great pickup, I think, in the next couple of weeks to get for round 17 coverage. Toby Rudolph as well had a pretty good game here, just purely in his work rate with a 71. One thing to mention, I guess, is Wade Graham. Obviously he went off again with the HIA, and he's going to be taking, I think, 4 weeks at least off, as he's had quite a few head knocks in the past few weeks. That potentially might open up a really, really interesting position for Talakai. So Talakai potentially, I think he's been coming off the bench, but with Graham, taking an extended stint on the sidelines, Talakai might move into the starting second row. And we saw Talakai on the back end of last season. When he gets a starting role, he's really, really explosive. He's got a very SuperCoach friendly game because he's a big body, gets a lot of tackle breaks, he offloads, gets good run meters, and so he's a very, very good SuperCoach asset. I owned him at the back end of last season, and he actually did very, very well, constantly cranking out 70s, 80s, and sometimes even an odd 100. And I think if he's starting, he's a very, very astute pickup. I think, I can't remember quite what his price at. He had a pretty high break even, so he's probably going to be a lot cheaper in the next couple of weeks. He could be a very interesting consideration if he plays in the starting second row, and you can pick him up at centre wing, which is really the benefit of him, is that he's dual flexible. Overall, though, there probably wasn't much else to talk about in this game from SuperCoach point of view, just the Sharks just taking this one out over the Penrith Panthers. So the first game of Saturday was the Gold Coast Titans take on Sydney Roosters up at Gold Coast, and the Roosters just winning this game 35-34. It was probably the game of the round, pending the Bulldogs Dragons one, although we'll see how that one goes. The Roosters went out to a very, very early lead comfortably in the first half. I think it was like 24-6. It even got to 30-4, I think, in the first early in the second half. And then the Gold Coast Titans were on the cusp of potentially their biggest ever comeback, and one of the best comebacks you'd see, a pretty poor performing Titans side against, high flying Roosters. And they even led 34 points to 30, but it just took a Sam Walker field goal at the end to ice the game for the Roosters, and to take away the 2 points. So the big standouts here in terms of the Roosters was Matt Ikuvalu. Finally, I brought him in a few weeks back, and he did okay the first game, and then the 2 games after that, just nothing. So I was really happy to see him score a double here and get 107. So he definitely was a big reason why I was able to do decently well this week. I think he's very, very low owned. So I was very happy to see that double for him. So good 107 for him. Joey Manu, whenever he plays at fullback, he always seems to deliver the SuperCoach points, coming away with 97 here. It's really just a case of if Manu plays at fullback for an extended period of time, then he's a very, very good pickup. But when he plays in the centres, he's just not quite the same in terms of SuperCoach point scoring. Angus Crichton here with an 87. Pretty maybe somewhat controversial, double movement in his try. I thought it was okay, but he had a little bit of a cheeky smile to Jaden Campbell and he was running and he almost got tackled. I think Trent Robinson's probably going to tell him, don't celebrate until you actually score the try. But 87 again, I flagged him potentially as, in the second row if you don't own him already. Maybe just going straight for him as opposed to maybe like a Corey Harionara or some of these other second row forwards, because that he's a season-long keeper. And I guess I've heard a little bit more talk about whether or not Crichton can actually get back into the New South Wales team. Very hard to justify dropping anyone barring injuries or suspensions when you've just won 50-6. I personally feel that Crichton's going to get back into that team, though, probably at the expense of Liam Martin. I think Fittler probably likes him, even if Crichton comes off the bench, because Sims didn't do anything to warrant, being dropped back to the bench. But I do think Crichton will probably get back into that State of Origin team. If he doesn't, that'd be amazing for SuperCoach, because then he would actually cover the round 17 bye week, and you could hold him throughout the duration of the season. Apart from that, though, Jared Waerea-Hargreaves had a very good game at 79 points. He actually played the full 80 minutes. I think part of that was probably the lack of Takiyahu, who's actually a late out of this game. Don't actually know what the reason for that was. But yeah, so Waerea-Hargreaves has actually had a couple of good scores back to back. He scored 74 last week, playing big minutes. So he potentially, maybe you could take a punt on like a JWH in your front row forward, cover round 17. And Sam Walker as well, doing pretty well, scoring a try and getting a try assist, I believe, as well as that late field goal on his way to a 69. Daniel Tupou seems to be very consistent, also scoring a try with a 62. They were the best performers out of the Roosters. Joseph Suwali was also obviously a late in, with Tedesco being a late out in this team. He did okay. He was actually 41 before update, so I don't actually know what he lost, but he went to 32, but he still make a stack of money this week as he had a negative break even. And Suwali, I think we will still at least be able to get him to play in round 17, so I don't think if you went for him, it's a bad decision this week to go for him. On the Titans side, there was a lot of decent scores because of that late comeback. Jamal Fogarty was the standout performer for them. I think this was 12 weeks too late, Jamal. I wanted this at the start of the season when I owned you. 150 points, scored a double, had all his goal kicking. I think he had a couple of try assists as well. So a massive game from him. Jared Wallace has actually had pretty good scores the past couple of weeks. He's on 91 here in this round, and I think he scored like in the 70s or something last week. Maybe he's a consideration, although I think there might be talk potentially that he might get back into that Queensland side. The Titans don't cover round 17, but maybe just someone to keep an eye on as well for front row forward. But I think you're probably trying to prioritise round 17 playing guys, and this might just be a good couple of weeks for him before he regresses back. Tino came off the bench, but he scored a try, so he was able to bump up his score to 78. Kevin Proctor as well with the try, 70. Brian Kelly as well, he did score a try. A lot better performance from him for SuperCoach as well with a 70. I know a lot of people probably sold him this week. If you didn't, you held. He's done pretty well this week, but I don't think you'd be too upset about him just getting a decent score. I think he wasn't showing that much for the past few weeks, so he was probably worth the sell. And Tyrone Peachey as well scored the try on his way to a 69, even though he did come off the bench as well. Greg Marzhew potentially could be looming as a very, very good cash cow. I think dependent on the injury extent of Anthony Don and whether he comes back into that side sooner rather than later. Because Marzhew's now played 2 games, scored an 82 and now a 64. So he's going to be set for a massive price rise if he plays next week. So maybe that's something to factor in. If you're looking to create some money, you could go for a Marzhew to hopefully generate some cash for you. And Dave Fafita, he came off the bench in this game as well. Only scored 47. 47 coming off the bench, pretty respectable. But that's good for us non-owners. That his break even was like 102 or 130, something like it was. I know there's a big difference between those two, but it was pretty high. So hopefully with this 47, he should go down way in price, and we can pick him up very nice and cheap very soon. Apart from that, though, probably not too much more to talk about. It was a very, very, very exciting game. As a Roosters fan, obviously I was very nervous watching the Titans come back, but I was happy that we got away with the win there. So the second game on the Saturday was the Rabbitohs taking on the Knights, with the Rabbitohs just winning this one pretty comfortably as well, 24 points to 10. The story of the game was all about Alex Johnson crossing over for a hat-trick. I was very happy that I actually made that last-minute decision, obviously in retrospect, of going Tedesco to Johnston. I think this is kind of what you would hope for, if you brought him in this week, that he would score doubles and hat-tricks over the next few weeks and get these really big 120 point plus scores. So 124 from him. If anyone did the vice captain, if you put the vice captaincy on him and potentially looped, that probably was the best decision, because some of the other gun players didn't do so well in terms of, comparing to Johnson this week. So that would have been a good call. I brought in Cody Walker and he did pretty well, with a couple of tries for Johnston on his way to a 76. Not really much else to talk about on the Rabbitohs side of things. So SuperCoach was really just, Walker and Johnson on the left there. I mean, Latrell, actually, if any of you follow me on Twitter, I was actually very potentially close to doing Tedesco to Latrell, because I knew Latrell, at fullback, fullbacks always score very well, especially next week against the Broncos. Latrell had a quiet game here with a 48. He didn't have any try assists against the Broncos, though, who are conceding over 100 points a game to fullbacks. Latrell next week will probably go off. But I ended up going to Johnson just purely because I knew Latrell probably wouldn't cover round 17, but Johnston would, so I was happy just to take that. And obviously in this particular game, Johnson performed much better. On the night side of things, I think there's really not too much happening here until we're just all waiting for Ponga, Mitchell Pearce, and etc. to come back. Apparently Ponga is due to come back next week, and potentially Mitch Pearce as well. So if you are holding some Knights players, then maybe it's worth seeing how they perform with those guns back in their team. They might do a lot better. I mean, Jacob Safidi and Kurt Mann here were the best performers with a 67 and 66. I mean, Kurt Mann's had a couple of games scoring back-to-back 60s, but I don't think you're really going to be considering either of those two. I mean, Jake Clifford with a 62 did okay as well. In terms of the more highly owned guys, like, your Jaden Brayley, Mitch Barnett, Connor Watson, Brayley got a 56-point game, basically all in tackles and a couple of runs. So 56, you probably take that after a few lower scoring games from him in the past few weeks. Mitch Barnett with a 47. I mean, again, this is just kind of what he's resolved down to. He even got named on the bench actually in the last minute team change here. So coming off the bench on the 47, he's just going to be getting around the 45 to 50 to 55, I think. He's not really seeming to be breaking any much more than that, which is a bit of a shame given how well he started the season. And Connor Watson with a 34. I mean, he actually played at 5'8", so I was hopeful for a few more points from him, but just the 34 for him. Bradman Best as well, only with a 30, and potentially he's looking at an extended stint on the sidelines, I think with an ankle injury or like a syndesmosis. Definitely someone to watch, in case of we get any more news out of that, because I think a lot of people might have potentially just held him as a good 4th or 5th centering option, but if he's going to be out for such a long time, then he's definitely worth selling at that point if we get that new information. So the final game on Saturday was the Canberra Raiders take on the Brisbane Broncos, with the Raiders winning this one up pretty comfortably, 38 points to 16, giving them their first home win since round 1, which is actually crazy to think about. I mean, Bailey Simonson, if anyone held on to him up until this point, you've been heavily rewarded here, named at fullback, and again, Broncos keeping up that tradition, conceding a lot of points to fullbacks. He scored 116 points here, and obviously if he gets an extended stint at fullback, he's a great round 17 hold, and moving forward, because the Raiders do have a very, very good draw coming up as well. So definitely, I feel a bit dirty now that I sold him a couple of weeks back, but I couldn't have seen this coming. So yeah, congrats to any holders. Josh Papali'i and Jack Wyden did very well, both scoring tries, I think, in this game, 97 and 83 for the pair of them. Matthew Tomoko, I think definitely someone who we flagged as a bit of a preseason cash cow if he was named in the starting team. With this, all this kind of controversy around Curtis Scott, Tomoko was playing in the centres, and potentially if he gets an extended run of games, he could be a great kind of cheapie to go for that will cover round 17. And he had 83 points here, which didn't include a try. He had quite a decent base actually, so Tomoko could be a great consideration as well in the next couple of weeks. This was only his first game. If it gets confirmed, say like, I don't know, Curtis Scott hypothetically leaves the club or whatever, they just sit in for the rest of the season, and Tomoko nails that starting centre wing spot, he could be a fantastic cheapie to go for. I think, maybe a downgrade from like a Charlie Staines if you still had Staines, for example, because he would cover round 17 at that point in time, and the Raiders draw is very, very good. Emre Gula as well did very well with an 82 here. Apart from that, not really more kind of outstanding scores. I mean, CHN was a very, very big trade target this week, and definitely someone I was looking to get until this news of Tedesco. He came away with 56 here. I mean, he scored a very, very early try, and I was watching, I didn't watch the full game, I was only watching the highlights, but I checked the scores, and I saw after 15 minutes, he was on 45 points, and I was like, oh no, he's gonna go get a massive score here. But then he got a HIA, and, sent, Kobe Hetherington got sent off for that, which was ridiculous, put it that way. But CHN only ended up with 56. It was a bit of a quiet game for him for the rest of that. Obviously, his game was HIA affected, which may have played a part in that. I don't think you'd be too concerned though. I mean, 56, pretty handy, and he covered his break even, and it will go up in price a little bit. Apart from that, not really much else to discuss out of the Raiders. From the Broncos, I think the forwards are really the best investment to go for. I mean, Tavita Pangai Jr. is ticking along, scoring a 63 here. Matt Lodge has actually done very, very well in the past few weeks. I think he got 64 last week and then 61 this week. Obviously, a bit of that helps in that, Payne Haas is playing State of Origin, so his minutes are probably being managed. So Lodge has to take a bit more of a front row forward, bigger presence, I guess, playing bigger minutes. So 61 from him is very, very solid. And Payne Haas with the 56, not too bad considering the guy played, he played decent minutes in State of Origin, but as a front row forward, this guy just has a massive engine. Although Payne Haas's scores the past, I'd say a month or so, haven't really been reflective of what we know that he can produce at front row forward. So I don't think he's definitely an immediate trade-in target. I mean, he's definitely someone I think I'd just be waiting until post round 17 when he know that he's going to be playing more consistently big minutes for the Broncos. And apart from that, I mean, Tessie New was a very, very late call-up. Xavier Coates tweaked a hamstring in the warm-up. So Tessie New got into the team very late last minute and he scored a try. Potentially, depending on the extent of Coates' injury, anyone who's held Tessie New all throughout this period, he may be able to provide some decent scores at centre wing, because we saw that he was able to have pretty decent base and hover around that 40 to 45 average. And Tom Flegler, who I own, I'll just throw his name there, only with a 35, pretty disappointing. Definitely someone I'm looking to offload soon as he's done his job. He covered round 13 for me. Maybe I can convert him into a round 17 guy like a Tapau or a Luke Thompson, for example. So the first game on Sunday was the Warriors taking on the Storm, with the Storm taking this one out pretty comfortably, 42 points to 16. It is, I mean, let me just say, it's so weird now. I see a scoreline of 40 to 16. We saw that, we'll talk about the Eels, who also had a big win. The Sea Eagles scored 50 points, and now I'm just seeing these scorelines. I'm like, oh yeah, this is just standard. I think 5 years ago, if you saw someone score 50 points, it was once in a blue moon, and these 40, 50 point scores are just happening all the time, which I guess just for us just means maybe it's worthwhile just targeting attacking players, because they're the ones who are scoring all the points. Ken Mamalo, he was the best performer out of the Warriors, 105 points here, including a hat-trick in his last game for the Warriors. It was very emotional after the game, which was a nice scene to see. But yeah, did very well, and he'll be a handy pickup for the West Tigers. Cody Nikorima as well with the next best performer, 73 points. He's been very, very solid actually the past few weeks. He did get a very, very late try assist, which did bump up his score for Mamalo, but even without that, minus 12 points, or maybe minus 16 for the goal kick as well, he would have been hovering around the 60 points, which is still pretty solid, I think. So it's definitely a good, more point of difference halfback 5'8" consideration to go for. If you're looking to flip, say a Matt Burton sometime soon, he's definitely worthwhile consideration, as he's got the goal kicking as well. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck as well with a pretty decent 66, including an amazing try-saving tackle on Dean Eremaya. I do encourage watching that. I don't know how he was able to stop that tackle. And Tohu Harris and Josh Curran plugging along. They're pretty solid. Tohu Harris with a 57, basically all in base. And Josh Curran, who I've held all throughout this period of time, it was very nice to see him starting. And both him and Harris had very, very fast starts in terms of their point scoring, but it did plateau probably as they spent more time, kind of watching under the goalpost as the Storm racked up the score. Josh Curran, I think he played 54 to 58 minutes, something like that. So scoring 49 points in that time is pretty decent PPM, and I'll take that. And he could be a very good 4th or 5th second row forward to carry in your reserves moving forward. Apart from that, not really much else I think to discuss out of the Warriors. I mean, Adam Fanua-Blake came back. I think he played 50 minutes and only scored a 32, so that wasn't a good sign. So it's definitely not someone I'd be looking to rush back into the team. I'd probably prioritize a Tapau or a Luke Thompson, depending on how Luke Thompson goes later in the Bulldogs Dragons game. And then Chanel Harris-Tavita, I mean, he had a pretty exciting game. He put a massive hit on Brandon Smith, but then he actually tore his pec later in the game. So he's actually confirmed, I think, to be out for the rest of the season. So very interesting to see how that impacts the Warriors. We might see maybe Reece Walsh, when he comes back from his suspension, play at 5'8". Maybe move Nikorima to halfback and Tuivasa-Sheck to fullback. That might be the change that we'll see. potentially that might impact Nikorima's point scoring. So maybe something to watch for if you are picking up Nikorima sometime soon. Maybe something to consider if that's the lineup that they go with moving forward. Now, out of the Warriors, and out of the Storm, some big scores here. I mean, Nico Hines with an 87. He was on 61 pre-updates, but then he was able to get some try assists and stuff that he was, I think, in my opinion, justified. And I'm a bit biased because I captained him this week. 87, very handy from him. He just always seems to be a good attacking threat out of the Storm. Definitely just shows that how important the fullbacks are now in terms of point scoring. And Harry Grant with an 83, that did include a try and a try assist as well. Coming off the bench, he still does the business. I think just cementing his position as the best hooker to go for, which is why I kind of mentioned earlier in the week. I think even though he's playing Origin, he's playing off the bench, I think he's still probably the best hooker to go for if you can afford it, and maybe one of the few guys that I'd actually be looking to pick up pre-round 17 who does miss that game because of State of Origin, because I think we just see him coming off the bench. He's still able to generate some attacking stats and get very good scores. Brandon Smith, I know is doing so well for any owners who got him in the past month or so. He scored a try here again, scoring 80 points here. So yeah, I'm a bit filthy that I didn't jump on Brandon Smith as well, but he's been very good for any new owners over the past month. And Tom Eisenhuth also scored a try on his way to a 79, as did Jerome Hughes on his way to a 71. They were the best performers out of the Storm. I mean, we had Cam Munster only with 30 points. I think it just wasn't quite his game. He had quite a few things. He got put in report, conceded a couple of penalties, had like an error and stuff. So he had a lot of negative stats in that 30. Just wasn't the game for him. And obviously coming off State of Origin, you can understand he wasn't feeling fully fresh. But yeah, only the 30 points from him. Not that great of a showing. But overall, the Storm were very comfortable winners in this game over the Warriors. So the second game on the Sunday was the Eels taking on the Tigers, with the Eels again being very comfortable winners here, 40 points to 12. The star of the show for the Eels was Mitch Moses, 112 points here for SuperCoach. He did score a try. He actually bombed a try earlier in the match as well. He just had to put the ball down and he knocked it on. But still 112 points from him. Very good game. Clint Gutherson scored a double on his way to a 95. So again, for people who jumped on him, say in round 13, selling Tedesco or Turbo, he's done very well over this period of time. And coming up against the Bulldogs next week, definitely it might be the last time I see Gutho in my team in round 16, because he won't cover round 17 bye week, and at that point I might maybe just flip to Tom Trbojevic or Pappenhausen. I think the talk is that Pappenhausen is coming back in round 16, and so I can't remember who the Eels play in round 16, but the Storm, actually I can't even remember who the Storm plays, but we'll get into that in the next couple of weeks. Gutherson might make way soon, but he's done his job. He's making some money and offering decent point scoring in that period of time. And Isaiah Papali'i had a very solid game. He was tackle breaking for fun in the first half, and added that to the end of the game. He ended up with an 85. That did actually include a sin bin, and potentially he might be getting suspension. He dropped his knee into Luciano Leilua's face, basically, in a tackle. I mean, it didn't look like a massive impact, but you could tell he kind of had the intention, because it actually looked like he tried to do it once in the tackle and missed, and then he did it again. So we may be seeing Papali'i get a suspension in the next few weeks, which is really going to suck, because we're already short on players. Really, we can't afford having like one of our gun front row forwards lose his time in the team as well. Sorry, I just finished recording, and then I've got some news that Isaiah Papali'i is actually only just got a fine for that knee dropping incident on Luciano Leilua. So Papali'i should actually be free to play for the next few weeks, which is great news as an owner, although the act that he did was a bit of a dirty act, so I'm surprised that it was only a fine. Joey Lussick did very well, scoring a try and on his way to an 81, just on Lussick and Reid Marnie as well. So I've read from NRL Physio that Reid Marnie potentially is pushing for a round 16 return, but the thing is that the Eels will then have round 17 as a bye week, and they also get an extra week off between round 15 and 16. So apparently they potentially might be very cautious with him and make him miss the round 16. So therefore he would have the round 15 week off as well, round 16, 17 as a bye, and then he'd come back in round 18 fully fresh. So if that is the case, if anyone has held, just maybe think about that a little bit more, because up until round 18 is quite a long time, and maybe that kind of changes your trade strategy if you're a Reid Marnie owner. Nathan Brown got a 77, that included a try assist here. Dylan Brown with a 64, he always has very good base. Threw in like a line break here as well to get his way to a 64. And those are the best standout performers out of the Eels. I mean, I've got Junior Paulo here with a 48. That only came in around 35 minutes, so he had very good PPM. And Ryan Madison, though, was one of the low points of this game, only 39 points, and he only played 53 minutes, which is a bit of a concern because we're so used to Madison being like that 80-minute edge back rower, and in that time he always delivers like 70 to 75 points consistently, but only the 39 points here. I think the Eels do have a lot of good forwards that they can rotate. You've got like a Bryce Cartwright, a Sean Lane coming off the bench, near Cora as well, so it does make sense that Madison potentially is getting rotated now. But Isaiah Papali'i seems to be getting extra minutes. He played the full 72 up until his suspension, but Madison seems to be the one who's actually getting rotated. So that's definitely a bit of a concern. I mean, I'm not an owner, and I think if you weren't an owner, I wouldn't be looking to buy him anytime soon. But if you own him, I wouldn't panic. I would just kind of hold him because we know that he's a good SuperCoach player if he gets those minutes. Out of the Tigers, the best performer for them was Jacob Little on his way to a 69. He's had a couple of good games now back to back. Apart from that, no one else scored over 60. I mean, Alex Twal with a 54 just kind of goes through his usual work rate. And you had Luciano Leilua only with a 46. So really not much to speak of. I mean, down at the bottom there, I've got two players there. Dave Nofaluma, only with a 26-point game here. He only played 58 minutes and he came off with what looked like a bit of a quadriceps injury. So that's definitely something I need to be keeping an eye on as an owner. If he's out for a long period of time, he's definitely going to be a sell, and he hasn't done that well so far since I've got him. I've only got like 100 plus score out of him since when I bought him in like round 7 or 8. So yeah, he hasn't done too well. Dane Laurie only with a 21 as well. I mean, with Nofaluma and Laurie, I kind of also mentioned that they're potentially decent like 4th or 5th centering options for the rest of the season. But I'm kind of reassessing that a little bit now, given that the Tigers also do play the Storm next week. And, historically, no one really scores well against the Storm. And so I'm thinking maybe these guys are sells as they've kind of peaked in price, or at least Laurie has. Nofaluma is tanking in price, so maybe I would just hold Nofaluma instead. But that's also dependent on his injury news that we get. And Adam Doohy only with a 9-point game here. I mean, I did say he was like an okay sell to Cody Walker. Obviously, Dewey's done very, very well over the past month, but his game was also HIA affected. He went off and missed the last 25 minutes of the game after getting a hit from Mike Acevo. And Adam Dewey, only with the 9 points, he's probably going to start tanking in price. So I think if you haven't made that switch already, I definitely would be switching Adam Dewey to like a Cody Walker or like a Sean Johnson, Cody Nikorima, etc. I think that's a very safe move to make. So the final game of the round was the Bulldogs taking on the Dragons, and the Bulldogs actually come away with a bit of an upset here. 28 points to 6, a pretty comfortable win in the end for them. I think their second win of the season after beating the Sharks earlier in the season, and a pretty bad defeat for the Dragons, especially just coming off a big win last week over the Broncos. Jake Averillo was a standout performer for the Bulldogs here, 103 points pre-updates, and he scored a double, throwing his goal kicking, and he just looked pretty good on the park. I watched the second half of this game, none of the first half, but yeah, big game from here at 103. Adam Elliott also scored a try in the second half on his way to a big 91. And Jeremy Marshall-King as well went through a gaping hole near the try line for a 79, and what was honestly, if you look at the replay, pretty horrible defense on the goal line from Matt Duffy and Ben Hunt. They just had eyes out of the back and weren't even watching the guy with the ball, and Marshall-King just went and strolled over under the upright, and a pretty bad defensive showing overall, to be honest. The Bulldogs, to their credit, they completed almost all of their sets. I think at one point towards the end of the game, it was 41 of 43 sets, so very, very good at controlling the ball, and overall just dominating the Dragons as well with their forward pack. Speaking of, we had Luke Thompson do pretty well with a 58, and Jack Hetherington actually had a really, really strong start to the game with a 53, although he's copping a bit of flack on social media for a bit of a milking of head high clash, which is fair enough, I guess, given the sentiment around the whole situation at the moment. To be honest, there wasn't really much else to report out of the Bulldogs in terms of point scoring. I don't think they're too heavily owned as it is. Luke Thompson is probably the guy that you'd be looking at, and 58 is pretty solid, I guess, in front row forward, but not quite the big scores that he's been getting recently, like in the 65 to 70 range. Out of the Dragons, really, the only points scored were in the forwards. I mean, you had Andrew McCullough with 63 points here. He made 62 tackles, which is just ridiculous. I mean, this is like a throwback to the Sean Fenton, David Stagg kind of players. So really, he was the only guy to score over 60 in this game. Obviously, this is pre-updates. You had like a Blake Laurie, 59, Paul Vaughan, 58, Jackson Ford, 48. Really, that's not much else to really speak about. I mean, Corey Norman did get a try assist for their lone try with a 47, although he's just been told by the club that he's not wanted in 2022. So, yeah, he'll probably be on the market for another club and exploring his options. We have Jack Bird as well with a 46, but overall, honestly, the Dragons were just so quiet, and I think it's really a big flop for any players who jumped on their attacking guys like your, Matt Duffy, Michaeli Ravalawa, your Ben Hunt. I mean, Duffy here, he's got 22 points, Ravalawa 22, and Ben Hunt 12. Just not doing the business and really flopping. And a lot of people would have bought them for this particular game, up against the low-ranked Bulldogs, hoping for a big win, especially after what they produced last week against the Broncos. Yeah, they really just flopped in this game, and to be honest, there's just not much more to speak about here, I think. Dragons obviously don't play in round 17, so I'm not really looking too heavily at any of their players, and Bulldogs they do. So, Luke Thompson's probably the main guy I'm looking at. I mean, maybe a Josh Jackson as well. He got us 53 here, but he did actually get sin bin as well. So, you take that sin bin out, he probably was pushing around the 61 point, or even 63 actually, which is a lot better of a showing for SuperCoach. But overall, not really much to talk about, I think, from a SuperCoach standpoint. Just a very thorough win for the Bulldogs. Well, that's it, guys. That is the roundup number 14. As I mentioned, 1,189 was the score I got pre-final updates, although I feel like that might be how it's going to stay for the remainder until lockout. Let me know in the comments below as well what you guys scored. I'm really keen to see what trades you did and how you scored for this week. If you guys liked the video as well, would really appreciate a thumbs up, and do please consider subscribing to the channel as well if you haven't already, as I put more videos out throughout the 2021 SuperCoach season. But until then, see you guys in the next video.